Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Harris, I agree with you when you say that our best line of defense as individuals is exposure. People need to understand that they are being manipulated, and a lot of this hearing has been talking about the manipulation, algorithms, artificial intelligence. I want to talk about the manipulation by human intervention, human bias. We don't allow, or we certainly put restrictions through the FCC on an individual owning their ownership of TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, because we don't want that monopoly of content in a community, much less, Facebook, Google access billions of people, hundreds of millions of Americans. So I had staff on Instagram go to the Politico account, and by the way, I have a video of this, so I'd like to enter that into the record. They hit follow, and this is what the list they were given, and this is in the exact order, and I'd ask the audience and the witnesses to just see if there's a conservative in here, or how many there are. Here's the list. Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, New York Times, Huffington Post, Bernie Sanders, CNN Politics, New York Times Opinion, NPR, Economist, Nancy Pelosi, The Daily Show, Washington Post covering POTUS, NBC, Wall Street Journal. Pete Buttigieg, Time, New Yorker, Reuters, Southern Poverty Law Center, Kirsten Gillibrand, The Guardian, BBC News, ACLU, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke, Real Time with Bill Maher, C-SPAN, SNL, Pete Souza, UN, Guardian, HuffPost Women's, Late Show with Stephen Colbert, MoveOn.org, Washington Post Opinion, USA Today, New Yorker, Women's March, Late Night with Seth Meyers, The Hill, CBS, Justin Trudeau, it goes on. These were 5 conservative staff members. If they're really algorithms shuffling the content that they might actually want to, or that they would agree with, you'd expect you'd see maybe Fox News, Breitbart, Newsmax. You might even see like a really big name like Donald Trump, and there wasn't. So my question is, who's producing that list? Is that Instagram? Is that Politico site? How is that being generated? I have a hard time feeling that's generated or being manipulated by an algorithm or by AI.
I don't know any. I'd be really curious to know what the click pattern was. That, in other words, you open up an Instagram account and it's blank, and you're saying that if you just ask, "Who do I follow?" or from a
you
empty
hit
account,
follow, and you're given suggestions for you to follow.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly have no idea how Instagram ranks those things, but I'd be very curious to know what the original clicks were that produced that list.
So, can anybody else explain that? I mean, I don't believe that's AI trying to give content to a conservative staff member of things they may want to read. I mean, this to me looks like Instagram, if they're actually the ones producing that list, trying to push a political bias. Mr. Wolfram, you seem to want to weigh in.
The thing that will happen is, if there's no other information, it will tend to be just where there is the most content or where the most people on the platform in general have clicked. So it may simply be a statement in that particular case that I'm really speculating, but that the users of that platform tend to like those things. And so if there's no other information...
So again, that you'd have to assume then that the vast majority of users of Instagram are liberal progressives.
That might be evidence of that.
Ms. Stanfield, is that what your understanding would be?
Thank you, Senator.
By the way, we could probably do it on Google, too. It'd be interesting, but...
I can't speak for Twitter. I can speak for Google's stance just generally with respect to AI, which is we build products for everyone. So we've got systems in place to ensure no bias is introduced.
But we have, I mean, you won't deny the fact that there are plenty of instances of content being pulled off of conservative websites and having to repair the damage of that, correct? I mean, what's happening here?
Thank you, Senator. I wanted to quickly remind everyone that I am a user experience director and I work on digital well-being, which is a program to ensure that users have a balanced relationship with tech. So that's
Mr. Harris, what's happening on here? Because again, I think conservatives have legitimate concern that content is being pushed from a liberal progressive standpoint to the vast majority of users of these social sites.
Yeah, I mean, I really wish I could comment, but I don't know much about where that's happening, so.
Ms. Richardson?
So there has been some research on this, and it showed that when you're looking at engagement levels, there is no partisan disparities. In fact, it's equal. So I agree with Dr. Wolfram in that what you may have saw was just what was trending. Like even in the list, you mentioned Southern Poverty Law Center, and they were simply trending because their executive director was fired. So that may just be a result of the news, not necessarily the organization. But it's also important to understand that research has also shown that when there is any type of disparity on partisan lines, it's usually dealing with the veracity of the underlying content, and that's more of a content moderation issue rather than what you're shown.
Okay, anyway, like to get that video entered into the record, and we'll keep looking into this.
Without objection, and to the senator from Wisconsin's point, I think if you Google yourself, you'll find most of the things that pop up right away are going to be from news organizations that tend to be to the left. I mean, I had had that experience as well, and it seems like if that actually was based upon a neutral algorithm or some other form of artificial intelligence, that since you're the user and since they know your habits and patterns, you might see something instead of from the New York Times pop up from Fox News or the Wall Street Journal. That to me has always been hard to explain.
Well, let's work together to try and get that explanation, because it's a valid concern.
Senator Tester, thanks.